Chapter 1. Skyward on the Wind. The balloon trembled in the pre-dawn hush, its slip envelope catching the first pale fingers of light like a ghostly sail. Below, the world was still wrapped in the breath of night, the fields of France, a patchwork of shadows and silver. The air smelled of damp earth and burning coal, the last embers of the ground crew's fire curling into the sky. Captain Alistair Graves adjusted his goggles, the leather creaking softly against his temples. The wind was a whisper against his ear, a promise of the heights to come. Steady now, he murmured more to himself than to his companion, the young mechanic Elias Voss, who was already checking the altimeter with nervous precision. The balloon's basket swayed gently, the ropes groaning as the last of the sandbags were cast overboard. The ground crew had vanished into the mist, their voices fading into the distance. Only the distant toll of a church bell remained, a slow, mournful countdown to lift off. Insolence. The moment stretched, suspended between earth and sky, as if the world itself held its breath. And then, with a suddenness that made Elias gasp, the balloon surged upward, the wind rushing past like a living thing. The ground fell away in a dizzying rush, the field shrank into toy-sized squares, the trees dissolving into a green haze. The air grew thinner, colder, the balloon's envelope swelling against the dawn. Graves exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath. He had flown before many times, but this ascent felt different. The sky was not just a canvas, it was a living, breathing entity, and he was but a fleeting shadow within it. The wind carried voices, or so it seemed, faint, indistinct murmurs like the echoes of long-forgotten conversations. He turned his head, listening, but the sound was gone. Elias, his face pale beneath the goggles, clutched the edge of the basket. "Captain," he said, his voice tight, "do you hear that?" Graves frowned. "Hear what?" "Nothing," Elias admitted, though his fingers tightened around the brass rail. "Just the wind. But it sounds strange." Graves studied him. The boy was young, barely 20, his enthusiasm tempered by the weight of this first true flight. He had read the journals, the accounts of the great balloonists who had vanished into the heavens, their fates unknown. Graves had tried to reassure him this was a scientific expedition, nothing more. But now, as the balloon climbed higher, the air growing thin and the horizon stretching endlessly before them, even Graves felt the weight of the unknown pressing in. The sun rose, a pale disk behind the clouds, casting the world below in a golden haze. The balloon drifted, carried by currents only the sky itself understood. Graves consulted his instruments, his gloved fingers tracing the dials. The pressure was dropping steadily, the air growing colder. He reached into his coat and withdrew. A small, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with his own notes, his own theories. The wind, he had written, was not just a force, it was a language. And if one listened closely enough, it might reveal its secrets. Elias shivered, pulling his coat tighter around his shoulders. "How much higher do we go?" Graves hesitated. The plan had been to reach the upper limits of the troposphere, to test the boundaries of human endurance. But the sky was vast, and the wind was restless. He glanced at the altimeter. They were already higher than any man had dared before. The air was thin, the balloon straining against the unseen currents. Then, without warning, the wind shifted. The balloon lurched violently, the basket swinging wildly as the envelope twisted in the sudden gust. Elias cried out, stumbling against the rail. Graves grabbed for him, his own heart hammering in his chest. The world spun, the horizon tilting at impossible angles. For a moment, it seemed as if the sky itself was alive, writhing beneath them, pulling them deeper into its embrace. And then silence. The wind stilled. The balloon hung motionless, suspended in the endless blue. The sun burned overhead, its light too bright, too harsh. Graves blinked, his vision swimming. The air tasted metallic, the scent of ozone sharp on his tongue. He turned to Elias, but the boy was staring upward, his face slack with awe. "Captain," Elias whispered. "Look." Graves followed his gaze. And there, high above them, drifting like a phantom in the sky, was another balloon. Its envelope was tattered, its basket empty. It moved without wind, without purpose, as if guided by some unseen hand. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, swallowed by the clouds. The wind returned, a soft, insistent murmur. The balloon began to drift once more, carried by currents only the sky understood. Graves opened his journal, his fingers trembling slightly as he wrote. The words came slowly, deliberately. "Something is watching us." The wind carried them onward into the unknown. And as the world below faded into memory, Graves knew one thing with absolute certainty. They were no longer alone in the sky.